My name is Matty Bustani Wood, and in 2010 I was diagnosed with a medulloblastoma at the age of 5. Briefly, medulloblastoma is the most common cancerous brain tumour found in children, and it's central nervous system brain tumour, so it can spread across the brain and into the spinal area. My family is also half Brazilian, and I was diagnosed while on holiday in Brazil by my mum's cousin, who happened to be a neurosurgeon. I had an 8-hour surgery, and as I remember, I came out of it whistling early 70s progressive rock music. And so it seemed surgery hadn't impacted me too much. And my head was also bandaged, and my hair was sticking out above it, so my dad always used to tell me I had a pineapple head. And 2 weeks after surgery, I returned to England, and I was treated with a month of radiotherapy, and then just under a year of chemotherapy at UCLH, Gosh, and the Whittington. But treatment was not easy. So one of the first things that happened was that my hair began to fall out from the radiotherapy, which made me feel slightly uncomfortable with the way I looked. And along with my appetite as well, I also lost my sense of taste, and I vomited when I did eat. And I also began to struggle with maintaining my weight, so I usually felt tired or usually had very little energy. And at the time, I knew very little about what was going on with me, but I frequently had low blood counts, a lot of transfusions, and towards the end of my chemo was hospitalised a few times for neutropenia, which is when my immunity is compromised by chemo. It really it's quite upsetting, as well as annoying, because I just really wanted to go to school. But something that was really helpful for me in coping with these challenges was forming a strong relationship with doctors and nurses who looked after me. Hospitals can be quite a scary place for children, all the medical procedures and all the kerfuffle. But it recently struck me how important it is for doctors to establish this communication with their patients, especially with children, because it makes life less scary and it humanises the experience. In fact, one of my favourite doctors once said to me, treat the patient, not the disease. Essentially, you're not treating an object, you're treating a human being, really. Also, my complicity with the doctors was actually quite fun for me. I grew to really love quite a few of my doctors and nurses, including my psychotherapist, my ENT specialist, my oncologist, my community nurse, Dr. Fidelis, and not to mention my surgeon back in Brazil as well. But it's hard not to acknowledge that my mum and my brother were key to my success. My mum had weekly meetings with my teacher, so he could tell her what they were covering in lessons, so she could get work for me, so I wouldn't fall behind in my schoolwork. And also my brother regularly tutored me at home on a mini whiteboard. He taught me all about maths and all about outer space. But he was only about 10 years old at the time, so the effect that he had on my education, I think, was like absolutely incredible. And my mum also made sure I was never bored in hospital. So whether I was an inpatient for chemo, waiting for appointments, hooked up to blood transfusions, I would always be doing schoolwork, watching a film, playing board games, making puppets, painting mugs, etc. I don't think there's never a dull moment, I don't think. And I also think the fact that I kept my mind turned on and didn't miss out on education in terms of knowledge, developing social skills, and learning how to work independently, I think that was all incredibly important to my success. On a more general point, I think one of the things that was available to me, and I think is still widely available to many people, is Make-A-Wish Foundation, which I think is a really good opportunity to get away from the thoughts of being in hospital and going through treatment. So I ended up going with my dad to Manchester to meet players from Manchester City. But even after I finished my treatment and had all my clear MRIs, I still faced several challenges. My hearing had started to steadily deteriorate during treatment and continued to do so. I ended up having to wear hearing aids to help with the hearing loss. At first, I resisted getting them for a long time because I was scared of being judged by my peers. Eventually, at the end of primary school, I gave in when the audiologist pointed out how useful they would become in secondary school. And now I wear them every day, and they're just part of my life. The other challenge was that the radiotherapy had affected my pituitary gland, which my biology teacher had described as the queen of all glands. One of the functions of this gland is to control the production of growth hormone. And so I've been injecting myself with growth hormone for the past 10 years or so. I've also been taking thyroxine every morning, as the radiotherapy affected my production of TSH, which stimulates natural thyroxine production. Dr. Spadeus is the one who looked after this part of treatment until she went to focus on success. I also experienced cognitive impacts from the treatment. For instance, I sometimes have difficulty with verbal reasoning. So sometimes I can't understand what someone says the first time, or it takes me a while to understand word problems and exam questions. And I also have difficulties with inference. So sometimes I can't figure out why people do what they do, or when I'm reading, it can be slightly harder for me to draw conclusions about characters. But I think school has really helped with this, and I now get extra time in exams. And I'm also a language student, and I study 3 languages for GCSEs, and I was entitled to live speakers during my listening exams. And I also have termly meetings with the teacher of the deaf for my borough, and I think it's like she's very, very useful, I think, because it's my closest and my best opportunity to ensure I have all the support I need in school. And there's a lot of support available. So there's teacher training for supporting students with hearing impairments, radio aids, learning mentors, and they said extra time in exams as well. And these are all there to help you during crucial parts of life. And this is exactly where Success Charity comes in. So essentially aiming to support brain tumour survivors post-treatment and going into adulthood. And because Success is ongoing, it doesn't stop when you've been treated for a brain tumour. And in my early years post-treatment, I always had doubts about myself, whether I live up to my full potential. I certainly didn't imagine I'd do French, GCSE French, Portuguese and Mandarin, let alone continue Mandarin at A-level. I also worried that I would not be able to make friends because of what I had been through. I thought I would constantly be judged by people who didn't understand what I had been through. And also worried because of my hearing impairment, I wouldn't be able to hear clearly or engage in conversations. Another thing that troubled me was that I would have less presence because of my height, and it would be difficult for me to make friends. However, as it turns out, I have amazing friends with whom I'm able to share my experience. So now, where am I? I am now 18 years old, in my last year of sixth form education, taking my A-levels this year in maths, geography and Mandarin Chinese. And I'm applying to university to study maths. I also love playing football, tennis and cricket, and I've worked as a tennis coach for younger children. I also love playing chess, playing piano and listening to music. After going through treatment, I started to enjoy raising money to help brain tumour charities. In year 6, I did my first charity fundraiser for brain tumour research, and twice again recently. So as I did mention, I'm applying for maths at uni, but I feel like my love for it started while in hospital. Because it took a while for my speech to recover, maths became a vehicle by which I could feel comfortable and almost talk to myself non-verbally. Sometimes I thought, and sometimes still feel, that my height, my hearing, and my lack of confidence will limit what I'm able to achieve. As it turns out, this isn't true. But it's important to be ambitious about yourself. And there shouldn't be any boundaries to what survivors like me can and want to do. Thank you very much for listening, and to Dr. Day for a fantastic